My name, I'm Michael, and there's Alton and Chuck. There's two honest guys and a liar. You're going to have to figure it out. Right? I have some announcements for you. The most important announcement is there are 3 bathrooms here. One bathroom is right here on the side, but you can't go there until intermission. And then there's 2 bathrooms. Go out here and take a left. One this way, and one is up the stairs, so take the gamble. Is he mocking me?
No, he's
Yeah, he's helping. Okay. So now another announcement is no photography. You're going to see Ken taking pictures, but he's the president, so he has, that's currently he can do it. He has immunity. So he'll be doing that for us. A couple of other announcements. You'll see these little box things, although I turned it into a nun, made by this fine gentleman. And if you turn to the side, one side it says March Extra, and then they give you a February date. It's actually a February Extra. All right, so we got that one. And you'll also find a handy-dandy little card for upcoming shows, particularly this one, Finding Your Way, March 9th. And you have some information here on the back. Like you'll see the Portland Storytellers.org. You can learn everything you need to know and take it from there. Phones, please turn your phones off. Just, from there. All right. Anything else? Ken, is there anything else I need to say?
I think you got it.
I think I got it.
No fist fights.
wagering. Who's the liar?
You must decipher.
You'll have to do that.
We do not know.
Oh, I know what the other one is. If you have got a little card to fill out, and if you turn it into Ken, we'll have a drawing at intermission time, and the winner gets 2 free tickets to the next show. All right. So, guys, I'm going to give this to you. Thank you very much. The story that I'm going to tell you tonight has been told in the Pacific Northwest for over 2,000 years. It belongs to the Okanagan tribes, who way back when lived as far away as what we today would say Penticton, British Columbia, all the way to the Willamette Falls. It's a creation story. It's a sacred story, no less sacred than Adam and Eve or the Hindu story of Brahman creating the sky, the earth, and the seas. And it deserves to be honored. But I'm an Irish Catholic guy. And I'm looking at, how do I do this? Well, as I got through the process, I picked up a couple of friends that I need to thank. Thank you, Coyote, for allowing me to tell this story and for igniting my imagination. Thank you, Raven, for showing me the incredible importance of being able to look at things from a different point of view. The Creator spoke, and the earth was formed. Soon, the earth teemed with life. First came the rock people, and then the vegetable people. And after that came the fin, furry, and feather people. And in time, the Creator returned and called out to all the people to tell them that the time of the human being had come, and that human being would have a connection with some of the people. And then he went on to say that he would give those people who have that connection new names and special powers. And finally, he invited all the people to come to the sacred lodge at dawn, where they could witness the human being coming to be and witness those who will get that new name and their new powers. And with that, he faded back into the sky. As you can imagine, everybody was really excited about this. They were talking back and forth to everybody, but nobody was more excited than Coyote. He looked at everybody left and right, and then he goes, "Did you see that? That was awesome." And they looked at him and went, "Well, Coyote, we're right here. We saw it. The whole world saw it. What is wrong with you?" Well, Coyote didn't even bother answering that question. He started telling his story, and he said, "Look, here's what happened. When the Creator was talking about new people getting a new name and new powers, he was looking right at me. It was awesome. This is wonderful." Well, some of them just didn't believe him, and others just rolled their eyes, going, "Well, here goes Coyote again." But he didn't care. He just kept telling his story, and he did it all day long until finally Father Salmon came forward and said, "Now, if we're all going to be at the Sacred Lodge at the crack of dawn, it might be a wise thing to go home and get some sleep." And everybody agreed that would be a very wise thing to do. Everybody, except Coyote. Coyote was, no, I am not going to sleep. I'm going to stay up all night long. I'm not going to go to sleep because if I fall asleep, I might miss the dawn. And I want to be the very first person to receive a new name and new powers. So I'm staying awake. Well, he kept telling people that until he noticed everybody had gone to sleep. But that didn't bother Coyote. He started talking to himself. He wondered, I wonder if the Creator will give me the wisdom of the salmon, or the strength of Mother Bear, or maybe wings of the raven, or maybe all three of them at once. That'd be awesome too. Oh no, he said, I can't start yawning. If I yawn, I'm going to fall asleep. I've got to do something. And then it hit him. He was going to run. Now, that's not a brag. Coyote really was the fastest person in the whole world. So he took off running. And he ran all the way around the world twice. And for a while, it worked. But after he calmed down from running, he started yawning again. He was, oh no, I've got to do something. And he looked around and he saw these two twigs just sitting there. So he grabbed them and well, I'll show you. He grabbed them and he put them in his eyes so that his eyes were wide open. And he said, oh, this is really great. I'll never fall asleep now. This is perfect. But the eyelids started getting heavy with sleep. And heavier until bing, they popped out. And Coyote fell asleep. Sorry. Well, Coyote overslept too. He didn't wake up to the crack of dawn, he woke up to the noise of all the people passing his den on the way to the sacred lodge. And when he went outside, he looked to the east where they were going, and it was so filled he couldn't see anything at all but people. And then he looked behind him to the west, and they were so far back there, they reached the horizon. But that didn't bother Coyote. He thought to himself, I'm the fastest person in the world. I've got plenty of time to get there, and I'm going to be the first person to get a new name and new powers. And he took off running, maybe faster than he ever had before. Raven was very impressed at his speed and his progress. But after a while, Coyote started slowing down. It was the price he was paying for never getting a good night's sleep. Till eventually, he was walking with the rock people. But that didn't bother Coyote. He thought to himself, yesterday, the Creator looked right into my eyes and promised me a new name and new powers. I'm sure that today, the Creator will recognize me. Well, eventually, it was Coyote's turn. So he stood before the Creator, and he puffed up his chest, and he went, Creator, I am here to receive my new name and my new powers. And the Creator just kind of looked at him. He said, Coyote, I have no new name for you. You are Coyote, and you always will be Coyote. Well, Coyote was stunned, speechless. And then he heard the people behind him laughing. And that bothered him. And he got sad. And he looked down, and he felt depressed. But he never got to the point of despair. Just before that, he felt something in his chest. And it went to his heart. And it filled him up. And he realized it was an emotion. Humility. Coyote had never thought about humility. But now he understood it. It wasn't thinking less of yourself. It was thinking more of others. So he looked up to the Creator and said, Dear Creator, I will be whatever you want me to be. And that's how you and I have come to learn that power. The Creator gave him two powers. The first power was the power to create whatever he imagined. But he was told by the Creator that you have to teach that. You have to teach that to the human beings because they too have that power. And you need to tell them that so that they will use it as well. And then there was silence. Now, the old Coyote would have looked up and said, Creator, you said 2 powers? And the Creator said, Coyote, your second power. You need to know that when you're teaching the human beings, some of them are slow learners. Some of them will have a hard heart and not want to receive it. Some will receive it, but it'll fade away. But others will take it in and live by it. You will die someday. But if you were true to that first power, if you spent your life telling the human beings that they could create whatever they imagined, I will raise you up over and over and over again, and you will always be there for the human beings. That's how you and I have come to know that we have that power to create whatever we imagine. Imagine that. Thank you. I turn it to you.
I like to move around a little more. When I was about 40 years old, I took a job that I didn't know how to do. At that point, I'd been working for about 20 years at public television stations, from big ones like Washington, D.C., to little tiny ones like Fairbanks, Alaska, making programs mostly local, some for PBS. But I felt like I'd sort of come to a stuck spot. I could imagine the next hour or maybe the next day, but I just couldn't see any further than that. There was technology changing that I felt like I couldn't keep up with. It was just a strange time. And so I applied for a job as an association manager and miraculously got it. Now, you may be glazing over when I say association manager. Association managers are at their best if they're invisible. I'll bet every person in this room is the member of at least one, maybe 2, 3, or 4 associations. Used car dealers have them. Manufacturers of hot water heaters have them. Everybody's got an association. It wasn't as much of a leap as it seemed, because the association that I went to work for was an association of public television stations. The brilliant association executive that hired me had a great deal of confidence in my future success based on what I'd been doing for the 20 years before. I wasn't so sure. I knew the sort of basic mechanics that I had. I had to produce 3 big conferences every year, and anywhere from 4 to 8 kind of workshop training events and some other stuff. I kind of knew that. But a good way to think about what I didn't know is a story about Winston Churchill. Hang with me on this. So Churchill was at some state dinner, and dessert was served. And Churchill tasted the dessert, and he pushed it away and said, "This pudding has no theme." So I knew the mechanics, the conferences, and all that stuff. You know, I had the cream and the sugar and the fruit. I didn't have the theme. But as so often happens, it miraculously arrived. There was a lot of travel involved in that work. Our member organizations were scattered from U.S. Virgin Islands to American Samoa. And early in that first year, when I was just trying to figure out how it all worked, I was somewhere at a B&B eating breakfast across the table from a guy, and some of you know this. Anytime you get 2 guys together, they may talk about the weather, but sooner or later, somebody's going to say, "Well, so what do you do?" And so the conversation descended to that point. And here came the career advice. This was as powerful for me as that advice some of you may remember from a movie in the 60s, Plastics. The guy looked at me and he said, "I'm a consultant. Clients hire me to do their learning." Ooh. That worked for me, because all that time that I'd spent at stations, it's one of my colleagues used to say, "We come into work every day and it's head down, ass up." And there's never any time to kind of look out there. So this was going to be my theme. And I began looking around for stories that would parallel the challenges that were confronting public television at that time. Let's think about this. This is the late 80s. Just before that, a public television station in most markets was one of 4 stations. Now we were one of 500 that came into every home on cable. And if that's not enough, what about the home video store down around the corner? Enormous competitive challenges to the industry. So I was looking around for who else had to confront something that big. And I stumbled upon the March of Dimes. And I got in touch with the woman who was the president of March of Dimes. She totally got what I was working on. And she said, yes, I'll come and talk to one of your meetings. So I had a group of managers of stations together, and she told a story. Now let's think about this. The March of Dimes was chartered by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who knew a little bit about polio. And it stood up this enormous medical charity. They had a research division. They had all the management that it took to run that. They had an enormous fundraising machine, all of this. They stood it up, and it was running. And Jonas Salk cured polio, killed it. What now? The March of Dimes board met. They said, we have all this machinery in place. What will we do? Birth defects. And they continued as one of the most effective health charities in America. She told that story. It was wonderful. And I just thought, boy, I brought her in here to motivate these people. And so then as soon as it was over, I'm kind of going around kind of checking in, how we doing? And one or two people said, yeah, I kind of get that. But mostly they said, that was kind of interesting, but I don't see what it's got to do with public television. I was disappointed, but motivated. I started looking for other things that I could bring like that. One thing that I looked into that was highly motivating for me was manufacturing. At that time, there was a whole approach to managing manufacturing operations that was pioneered by Peugeot, adopted worldwide by Toyota. I thought it would apply to the operations side of the industry, so I found seminars, and I went to this seminar to learn about this in Atlanta, and everybody that was there was what you'd expect. There were guys from a Lazy Boy furniture factory in Mississippi. There were people from a Little Debbie bakery in Tennessee. But there was this group of guys there from Delta Airlines. And I thought, that's kind of interesting. So they were kind of at a coffee break sort of bunched up, so I sort of over and kind of inveigled my way into their conversation, and finally there was an opportunity for me to say, this is really interesting. I'm in the service business too, like you guys, and here we're trying to learn about manufacturing. And the group just sort of opened up. And everybody sort of deferred to the guy that seemed to be the elder member of the group. And he looked at me and he said, yeah, we're from Delta, but we're in the manufacturing business. We manufacture seats in the sky. Ooh, this guy got it. This guy got it. After my experience with the March of Dimes president, I was meeting with another association executive. There's a whole club of association people. Her people, that's what association people call their constituents. Her people run the bakeries in supermarkets across the country. And I was explaining this problem. I said, oh man, it was perfect. It was just like a Harvard Business School case study. And I brought it right in and I held it up. But there was just no spark. And she said, oh yeah. I call that the 16th of an inch problem. You bring something that's exactly the same, you put it there, it's 16th of an inch. There's no spark. And then she said, yeah, with our members, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them surf. But I didn't give up. So the next path that I found that was interesting was the story of Mo Siegel, who was the founder of Celestial Seasonings. Sleepy Time and that stuff. Well, probably everybody's got a box of something from Celestial Seasonings. And Mo's story was that he had founded the business with some friends. They grew it. And he just decided, I can't figure out what's next. And he sold it. Went away. Moved up into the mountains of Colorado. Lived in a cabin. A couple of years passed. He had some new ideas. Came down from the cabin, bought the business back, and grew it into an international empire that dominates the health food industry. They trade under a bunch of names. You may know Hain. There's certainly Celestial Seasonings. They're making a lot more than tea. And it's because he'd stepped away to sort of look. I thought, this is a good story. I was in Denver for another reason, and I went up to Boulder. He agreed to see me. I told him what I was working on. He totally got it. He said, yeah, I want to talk to your people. So I had a conference coming up in a few months in Boulder, and we agreed that he would do that. He would speak there. And on the way out of his office, I passed by his admin who'd helped to set it up for us to meet. And she looked up at me and she said, so did Mr. Siegel say he'd do your conference? And I said, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And she said, look, I need to tell you, he does everything that he says he will do. But sometimes he kind of comes in at the last minute. Thank you. So the months pass, and it's now the first day of this conference that we're doing in Boulder, and I'm sitting at a table right up in the front with the board chair of the association, and it's kind of getting on to be pretty close to 9 o'clock, and it's just us at the table, and there's an empty chair there, and the board chair's looking at me like, you told me. And finally I said, look, you've got some stuff you need to do, so why don't you just get up and start that, and I'm sure he'll be here. At least I was pretty sure. But I told the hotel staff to leave the door to the ballroom open. So I'm sitting there, and my boss, the board chair, he's up there, and he's starting to read his stuff, and he's mostly staring at me. And I'm staring at the door. And suddenly, there's this sort of blur in the door, and it's Mo. And he's almost running, coming in there. When I met him, he was wearing like a gray sweatsuit. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than my car. He comes in. As soon as he comes into the room, the board chair's shoulders kind of go down. And he kind of shifts into the intro, and Mo slides in beside me, kind of settles, and then he leans over to me and he says, you're going to be here during my speech, right? And I said, yeah, I'll be right here. And he said, I need for you to stay right here so you can catch my clothes when I start to take them off. Yeah. Okay. So, board chair shifts into the intro. Mo gets up. He steps up to the lectern. And he starts this speech, and it's like, well, when I was with my friends at the Harvard B School, we prepared a case study that became the foundation for the creation of, and I could sort of feel this little ripple going through the room. This was not what I thought I had. Then he paused. He stepped back. He took off his coat. He threw it down to me. He took off his shirt. He threw it down to me. Under the shirt, there was a tie-dyed Grateful Dead t-shirt. He took off his pants. He threw them down to me. He had on lederhosen. And he came back up to the mic and he said, all that stuff about Harvard Business School, that was baloney, and you know it. When Bill Clinton was in London and he wasn't inhaling, I was in the mountains of Colorado with my friends, and we were inhaling. And he told the story of starting the business, literally drying herbs on old screen doors on sawhorses, and how there was so much passion in that. And then it became a business, and it just sort of lost the juice. That's when he sold it. And he went away, and just stepping back and looking at it again, he could see it a whole new way. And he bought it and came back. So, like before, because that's what meeting planners do, I'm sort of circulating around during the coffee break, trying to listen to the chat. And what I learned there is that just like the March of Dimes person, we had a fact pattern, a case study that was dead parallel. But it sparked because of the human factor of his connection with the people. I got that. I brought people from the supermarket industry to come and talk to my folks. Huge challenges for that industry. You wouldn't know it, but they were having a terrible time in the 90s. I found a guy from one of the very successful chains who I knew I had to get. As soon as I tracked him down, his title was Vice President for Strategy, and his name was Wiley Fox. I'm not making that up. I got him. I got microbrew people to come and talk about how they promote their product and position it against bigger competition. People from fast food. I got a reputation among the members of the association as the guy who was always looking out there for something to bring in that could help us see a way forward. And I did that for a while. And then I took another job that I didn't know how to do. I retired. Many people had told me before I retired, well, you know, you can kind of tell what somebody's going to do in retirement because it's kind of the same stuff they did when they worked. Well, that's what I've found. I'm kind of doing the same stuff. I'm learning. I'm looking around. I learned to fly paragliders. I joined the Peace Corps, learned a language, learned to live overseas, learned this stuff, what we're doing tonight, learned to play music. So I'm doing the same stuff, but here's the critical difference. Now, I only have one client. I recommend that. Alton, let's get you set up so we can hear you. And tell us a story.
I'm sure.
Can you all hear me now? Oh, this is good. Well, in the 5th grade, I joined science club with my best friend Keoki. Now, science club was kind of held in Mr. Farino's science class after school when he tried his best to try and teach us a little bit more about science. Now, science club had a mascot, a gerbil, and it was my job to go and take care of this gerbil. Now, this gerbil was wicked smart. I started calling him Fred, with a PH. D. I mean, he'd do stuff that when no one else was around, that was really amazing. I mean, for example, I'd, come in with a piece of fruit from lunch, whatever fruit they gave us for lunch, and I'd go and give him a little midday snack. And he'd see me coming in about lunchtime, and he'd get up on his hind legs, start pacing back and forth in his little aquarium. And when he liked something, he'd give me a thumbs up and smile. If he didn't like it, he gave me a thumbs down and a frowny face. Apples? Good. Raisins? Not so much. Well, I also began, carrying Fred around in my pocket. I mean, he loved that. And he'd go and poke his head out in the middle of conversations, I swear, just to freak people out. I also took Fred home on the weekends. You see, my best friend Keoki lived across the street, and in his garage he had an aquarium he wasn't using, and that became Fred's weekend home. I just put him in the aquarium, and all of a sudden I hear behind him, is that a mouse? Yeah, oh, what happened to his tail? Stuart and Stephen. These identical twins, tattletales with perpetual colds who lived up the street. He's not a mouse, he's a gerbil. Yeah, God, who would want a mouse with a stubby tail? I swear. I saw Fred kind of roll his eyes, turn his back to the twins, and bury himself in the wood shavings. Well, one day in science club, someone brought in a package of Oreos. And Mr. Furuno said, you know, if you can convert all the sugar in that cream filling instantly into energy, you have enough energy to power a model rocket. Now, me and Kyoki, we're really into model rocketry. No way, Mr. Furuno! And Mr. Furuno was so excited that we're actually paying attention that he began to tell us how to go and convert that creamy filling inside of an Oreo into rocket fuel. Kyoki and I are taking notes. We're asking lots of questions. Now, Mr. Furuno figured that, hey, there's no way us little kids will be able to get our grubby little hands on really dangerous chemicals like potassium nitrate. Mr. Furuno didn't know about our friend Patrick. Patrick was one of those guys who could get you anything. And we needed potassium nitrate. So I went up to Patrick to explain what we needed to do, and he told us what he wanted to use that for, and we told him, and he said he could get that for us. But he wanted in. Kyoki's garage became Rocket Central. Now, Kyoki, he wanted to build a little rocket and maybe send it up a couple 100 feet. But Patrick and I, no. We wanted to make a big rocket, send it up a couple 1,000 feet. So, following Mr. Furuno's instructions, we made up our rocket fuel from the middle fillings of Oreos, and we used old rocket engines and packed it in there, but we had a problem. We needed an ejection charge. See, when the rocket reaches apogee, which is the highest point of its trajectory, we needed a little expansion charge to go and push the nose cone out from the rest of the body to deploy the parachute or the streamer to go so we can safely recover the rocket. Patrick said, no problem. A few days later, he returns with a can of gunpowder. Yeah, I'll probably do it. He also had a length of det cord, detonation cord. This is what they used to actually set off real explosives. We had our ignition system. So, here we are. Now, lots of time we'd work in the garage, and after everyone would go home, I'd be the only one in the garage, and I'd take Fred out of his little aquarium and let him wander around the work table. He'd sit there and look at the plans, put his hands behind his back, and walk around and look at the finished rockets. And of course, he's listened to our conversation the whole time we're there. And one day, he came walking around, he came walking to me and sat there and stared up at me. Pretty cool, eh, Fred? You know, Fred, I'm trying to figure out, we're going to make this big rocket, and it's going to have a payload and everything inside, but we don't know what to put in the payload. I mean, hey, Fred, want to go up in the rocket? That's when I became the payload specialist. I let Patrick go and finish working on the engines, and Kyoki finish building the models, but I had to go and get Fred fitted out. I got a G.I. Joe flight helmet with a visor. Fit him perfectly. I got the flight suit, but I had to go and cut down the arms and the legs and stitch in some elastics so that it'd fit. And for safety, I got a G.I. Joe parachute pack. And I put one of the extra red parachutes that we had made for the rockets, I stuffed that in there. And for his safety parachute, I got a G.I. Joe med kit and strapped it across his belly. But it was too small to stuff a full parachute in there. So I kind of rolled up this orange streamer and stuck it in there, fit perfectly. And to finish off the ensemble, I got a G.I. Joe K-bar knife and I strapped it across his chest. He looked pretty spiffy. Well, launch day came around, and we grabbed all our gear and we put it in this big shopping bag, and we headed off down the street. Now, down the street, the government, in their infinite wisdom, was putting in Hawaii's first interstate freeway, the H1. They had torn up miles of houses and left this huge boulder field. I mean, boulders, some of the size of small houses there. Made the perfect secret launch site. We were just about to enter the boulder field when we hear from behind us, "Hey, what's that? Is that a rocket? Can we come?" Ah! Stuart and Stephen. We gotta let them come, otherwise they're gonna snitch on us. So, We find a little spot amongst the boulders, perfect launch site. We set up the launch gear, and Kyoki's sitting there getting his rocket. The rocket's a little rocket. He called it the Micron. And he put it on the stage. We sent Stuart and Stephen downwind. They're going to be a recovery team. Patrick was kind of wandering around in the middle distance just to get a good view. And Kyoki, he was our spotter. He climbed upon this big boulder with his dad's binoculars. When everyone was ready, clipped off a piece of det cord, stuffed it into the nozzle of our rocket engine, and I lit it. Oh, beautiful launch. Smoke trail going up a couple hundred feet. We're watching it, all of a sudden we hear this little pop. And all of a sudden the streamer deploys, falls down. Stuart and Stephen recover the rocket. Everyone's excited. This is exactly what we wanted to do. Ah, yes. And now it came time for our turn to launch this huge rocket. We called it the Demon. Huge rocket. I mean, Fred was wandering around my pocket. I put him in that payload capsule, and I got an extra piece of lettuce to go in for safety cushion as well if he ever got hungry. And we assembled the rocket. I looked in the payload, and I went, stuck in the det cord, and I lit it. Oh, beautiful launch. It went up a couple thousand feet. It was just a dot in the sky, and it was going up and up and up, and then suddenly, the sound of the explosion echoed across the houses. Kyoki got so startled, he fell off his boulder. He landed his arm. He's laying there in the dirt going, ah, my arm, my arm, my arm. I just thought I saw a flash of red up there. I looked around. Stuart and Stephen were gone. Patrick was gone. But I could have sworn I saw that flash of red in that debris field. And I ran over to Kyoki. I grabbed his binoculars. And I went and took a look. Unfortunately, the strap was still around his neck. So he was going, ah! And I'm looking up there. I said, yeah, there is a flash of red. And yes, it's Fred's parachute. And oh, but something was wrong. Fred's parachute was on fire. And as I watched, I saw Fred pull out that K-bar knife and start hacking at the shrouds of his parachute. And now he was free, but he's falling like a stone. In a few seconds, he's going to be a gerbil-sized strawberry pancake. And then all of a sudden, I saw he deployed a streamer. It was very visible. It slowed him down. I put down the binoculars, much to Kyoki's relief. Ah! Oh, oh, ah, my arm, ah! I started running. I started tracking that streamer. I could see if it fell down, it'd probably land right about there. There was an 8-foot wide pit with all this rebar sticking out at weird angles. Fred was in danger of becoming a gerbil kebab. Now I'm running along, and I said, I got this idea. If I can time it just right, I mean, with a running start, I can leap 8 feet. If I time it just right, and I leap, I can snatch that streamer out of the air and come down on the other side, avoiding the rebars of death. I reach the edge of the pit. I time it just right. I launch myself out into space. Did I tell you that I'm a klutz? Toe of my sneaker snags on one of those pieces of rebar. I start twisting this way. The streamer is going that way. I have to twist in midair, reach out, grab hold of something, pull it to my chest, and ooh! I land in the dirt on the far side of the pit. I'm dazed, and I realize I'm clutching something to my chest. Fred! Ah! I open my hands, and there's Fred, but he's not moving. I take off his helmet. His eyes are closed. Oh no! CPR! Never done CPR on a gerbil before. Ah! 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Breathe. Do I pinch his nose close? Ah! I stick his whole head in my mouth and I blow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then Fred opens his eyes. Fred, are you okay? I'm so relieved. I put Fred in my pocket, I gather up the rest of his gear, and I jog back to Kyoki. And that's when I hear this new sound. Woo, 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 woo! I'm looking around, I see police cars closing in us from all different directions. We're in big trouble! We grab up all the gear, I throw it in the shopping bag, and I pick up Kyoki, and we kind of hobble out through the whole boulder field. We get out of there, we get back to Kyoki's place. In the meantime, I'm coming up with a good story. Now, we wanted to go and play with some other kids' skateboards. They said it would okay, but they wanted to see our rocketry equipment. So we grabbed the rocketry equipment, we took it there, they were looking at the rocketry equipment, we were playing with the skateboards, and Kyoki fell off the skateboard and broke his arm. Yeah, good story. We arrived back in Kyoki's garage, and there's my parents, there's Kyoki's parents, and I'm about ready to launch into my story, when all of a sudden, from behind them, we hear... I look behind them. Oh, there's Stuart and Steven. Oh! I gotta tell the truth. We never saw Patrick again. Heard he transferred schools. Kyoki became one of the most popular kids in school because all the girls wanted to sign his cast and hear his story of how he broke his arm. Me? I got grounded for the rest of the year. Had to quit science club. And I was going to another school at the end of the year. I did see Fred one last time. The last day of school, I snuck into Mr. Furuno's science class, and there, it was empty, but there he was in the back wall, in his aquarium, there was Fred. He had a little desk. He had a stack of wood shavings with writing all over it. He had an ink pot, a feather quill, and he's scribbling away. And I looked at him and said, "Hey, Fred. How's it going? What you writing?" He looked up at me and he smiled. And with his quill, he pointed to the corner of his aquarium, and there was a neatly folded flight suit. And on top of it was a G.I. Joe flight helmet with visor. "Hey, Fred, I'm going to another school next year. I probably won't be able to see you again." Fred sat there and looked at me. And then he stood up and he faced me. "Thanks, Fred. Take care of yourself." Never saw Fred again. But I hope he got his book published. I mean, he deserved it. And after all, he was the first gerbil nut in the state of Hawaii. Thank you very much. We are now at the halftime point of the show, and now, again, to remind you, now that you can use this bathroom, you can also go down the hall to your left. In the back of the store, there's another bathroom, or if you go up the stairs to your left, there's another bathroom. If you also like to go and please patronize the bar, see Chris back there, he can help you out with any beer, wine, or hard cider, or any soft drinks. And if you don't drink beer, never mind, buy a beer for someone who does. Thank you very much. We'll see you in about 15 minutes.
the good news is they let me come back. All right, I have a couple announcements, and then we have the opportunity for a prize. That works for you guys. First off, everybody's seen this little thing that technically is a little box. And I might have mentioned this earlier, I think I did, but they have on one side a beautiful picture of a guy, and then it says, March, extra. Wrong. It's February, the 17th. And you have, in March, a great show coming up called Finding Your Way. And it will be Stephen, Ken, and Kira. Two of the three aren't all that smart. The other is a woman. But they put on a great show. So these have been passed around, and Stephen asked me that if you happen to see a couple extras sitting on tables, take them with you and give them to friends. It'll be just a tremendous show. And on the back of it, it gives you some information. Perhaps you might like to get more interested in the Guild, and you would see a address for it, the portlandstorytellers.org. And that'll also tell you about swaps. We do that every second Friday, is it?
Yep.
Right? Every second Friday at St. Philip Neri Church. It's in the evening, so you can get good information on that. And then we also have, throughout this rest of this winter and into the spring, there are more shows like this. We have Zoom shows. Rumor is that the guy doing the Zoom show in April, just boss. just great. I can't wait to hear him.
Who would that be, Mike?
So it's time for the drawing from the hat. There is no truth to the rumor that people have paid me. And the winner is... Oh, Peter. Peter, where are you? All right. There's a very handsome man in that deep corner. He's going to have this for you, and you need to talk to him. That's the price you pay. You talk to him, and he'll give you all the information you need. Did I cover everything, Ken? Can I stay? Okay, let's go. All right. And coming up on stage, Chuck.
My father and I had the same birthday, May 15th. This was a huge point of pride for him. We always celebrated together, but then there was an important change in the ritual when I was 10 years old. That was the year that guns had been around. My paternal grandfather, in fact, was an Olympic marksman in the 1920s. So guns were around. But on my 10th birthday, or just before my 10th birthday, my father came home and we sat down to dinner, and he put a brick of 500 rounds of .22 bullets in front of my plate. And he said, Saturday, for the birthday, we're going to pop some caps. And sure enough, came Saturday, we drove down to Cousin Sarah's place. This was down in the upcountry of South Carolina. Now, this was South Carolina, and I'm not really sure Cousin Sarah was really our cousin, because it is South Carolina. But she was definitely a friend of the family. She lived in this big but tumble down old house. And behind it, the land sort of went down, there was a little stream, and then there was a pretty sharp rise. It was a perfect place to set up beer cans you picked up along the road, or Necco wafers. Does anybody remember Necco wafers? They're about the size of a quarter, and when you hit them, they just explode. So we went there, and this was the first time that a gun was actually put in my hands and I was allowed to fire it. I came to understand more later about what happened that first time that I squeezed off a shot. My father had loaded a .22 hollow point bullet in the gun. Now, hollow point bullets are softer lead, and when they hit a target, they just mushroom. So the first time that I ever squeezed the trigger, it was to shoot at a grapefruit that was just far enough away so that there was a little bit of challenge in it, but I was assured to hit it. And I'll tell you what, when you see a grapefruit just explode, you understand the power that you have in your hand. Now, he magnified it with that hollow point. But that was a lesson I've obviously never forgotten. But the rest of the afternoon, it was set up beer cans, punch holes in them. He even taught me, you can put a beer can on the ground, and if you shoot just underneath it, it'll jump. I learned all of those things, and that became a ritual for us. But wait, there's more. After we'd either run out of ammo, or it was dark, or we were just tired of the racket, we'd walk back up the hill, and Cousin Sarah, who was a magnificent cook, would serve us strawberry shortcake. So this was the ritual all through my teenage years. Closest Saturday to the birthday boys would go down and pop some caps. So I went on, life went on. I went away to university, and now I just realized there's a part of the story that I've left out. My birth certificate, it says, Charles McConnell, May 15, 1947, time of birth, 11:59 p.m. And the attending physician was a family friend. So years later, I had related this story to somebody that I worked with, and she was really locked in on that. And a couple of days later, she dropped back by my desk and she said, so tell me that story again. 11:59, blah, 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 same day. And she was way into astrology. I mean, like way into astrology. So she wrote all this stuff down. And she went home and she cast detailed charts. I mean, it had to do with the longitude and latitude of the hospital where I was, all this, she did all this stuff. And a couple of days later, she came by and put them on my desk as if it would make any sense to me. And she said, look at this. It's circles, and I know. She said, no, look at this. They lied to you. Because if you look at the traits and the personality of the person who was born at that exact place in the last 4 hours of May 15th, 1947, it's got nothing to do with you. You're not anything like that. But look at this. The first 4 hours of May 16th, that description fits you like a suit. My parents were dead. There was no way to kind of say, well, do you know anything about this? So I took it on this way. I celebrate my birthday twice. I have strawberry shortcake twice every year in May. So I feel kind of special having two birthdays. So tell us a story, Mike.
All right. Let me get the microphone here. Please. This is something electric, and I haven't broken it yet. Okay. Thanks for that confidence. I think this is right. Okay. In 1978, I was a graduate student studying to become a Catholic priest. Now, in that department, there's no taking the summer off. You have to have some sort of ministerial job. So I went to this office to kind of look what was available. And what caught my eye was that the Jesuits, and you know them from Jesuit high school, forgive them, but they're also missionaries. And I was looking and I saw there was stuff going on in Alaska. There were 5 positions open. There were 2 in Fairbanks, 2 in Anchorage, and one was just fantastic. There were 4 missionary churches in these teeny little Inuit villages on the south side of the Yukon River, very close to the Bering Sea. This was bushland Alaska, big time. And I looked at it, and what was going to go on is the person would be teaching kind of a Bible camp at these different mission schools throughout the summer. So I applied for it and just hoped. Well, I got the job. I found out 2 weeks later that no one else applied for it. That got me a little nervous. Well, I was really impressed with the detail of everything. Like, my flight was arranged and all that kind of stuff, but as it turned out, going all the way from Washington, D.C. to Ammonok, Alaska, which was 2 sticks and a stone from the Bering Sea, I got to Ammonok late. But there was a church elder that was waiting for me at the airstrip, which was really a tough shed, where half of it was airport and the other half was company store and post office. And it was about twice the size of the stage. So he walked me down to my house, which happened to be at the opposite end of what they called an airstrip. I called it a dirt road. And I was so tired, I just went in, took my shoes off, and fell asleep. I woke up the next morning, actually close to noon, to the sound of motorcycles. And I went outside to see what was going on. It turned out it wasn't motorcycles. It was 3 elderly men, somewhat drunk, and they were riding these all-terrain vehicles that looked like tricycles with steroids. And they were zooming around on the airstrip. Well, to make the story shorter, one of them flipped his bike. He went flying through the air, and he was still holding on to the handlebars, but he was gone that way. He hit the ground hard, and the bike fell right on top of him. So it was from here to the door. I rushed out to help. Now, I was certified in first aid, and I knew what to do, and I got to him, and when I looked, the brake grip from the handlebars was in his neck, right behind the jaw. And he was just out of it, but I had to take it off. And so I got it off and moved the bike, and I applied compression on that wound. And I just about said, "Somebody call 911." And when I said, "Well, no, the nearest highway is 200 miles away." Fortunately, somebody yelled out, "I'm going to call the Coast Guard." Well, I maintained that pressure for a little more than an hour. When the Coast Guard got there, I turned everything over to them. They had brought in a plane to put this guy on. They stabilized him, and then he flew out to Juneau to a hospital. Now, this was my first day in Ammonok. You would think that the people would look at me as some sort of a hero, or at least a nice guy. But not one villager said a word to me. As that plane took off, they just disbanded. And even when I tried to talk to somebody, they would just turn and walk away from me. I walked back into my house, having no clue what was going on. But I had to get all cleaned up. In the course of that hour, that guy threw up 3 times. The first time was alcohol, the second time was some sort of food, and the third time was blood. And it was all over my left pant leg and my shoe, and I was trying to clean it off. And about an hour later, there's a knock on my door. And I open it up, and it's a young Inuit couple. And I invited them in, but they said, "No, we'll stay right here." And they stayed on the porch, and they told me the village elders had a meeting, and they wish for you to leave the village. And then they turned around and walked away. Well, fortunately, in the house, there was a satellite phone, and it was charged up, and I had all the information of who I should call. And I called Father Hargrave, the director of the program. And when I got him on the phone, he already knew what had happened. The church elders from the night before had called him and told him what happened. And he goes, Mike, I got to ask you a question. What did you say to the Coast Guard captain? I said, well, he was taking notes on everything, and he asked me what happened, and I told him everything. He goes, well, did you say something about him being drunk? And I said, well, yeah, I told him that all three of them were drunk. He goes, well, that guy his name is Isaac, and he's a village elder. And it was a good thing that you did what you did, but when you said that out loud to a stranger, you brought shame onto the village. And that's why they want you to leave. Then he continued on, and he goes, I've already called Daniel at Kotlik, which is one of the villages I would be visiting in about 2 hours upriver, and a church elder up there and a village elder as well. And he says, he'll pick you up tomorrow around 11, and we'll just reset you and make that your home base instead of Ammonic. And then he said, and Mike, just to be careful, stay in the house until he comes. So I stayed in the house till he came. He came about 11 o'clock the next morning, and he had his 2 grandsons with him. Now, I mentioned the Jesuits about this. Well, they were very present in that area of the thing, and this is sort of a side thing, but the 2 boys were twins. Now, the founder of the Jesuits in 1540 was Ignatius of Loyola. Their names were Ignatius and Loyola. I loved that, but I didn't laugh. I did not want to make another cultural mistake. I didn't laugh. So I didn't have much to carry. I had my backpack and a book, and then there were these 5 boxes in the living room that were marked Bible camp. So we took them with us as well. And as I got into the boat, I realized everything I do today is going to be for the first time. First, I was awed at the size of this boat. The 4 of us were in it. There was plenty of room, and they had outboard motors. And then they had another little baby motor. And it was just amazing. And I'm sitting in this boat going, I'm in an Inuit fishing boat. I'm on the Yukon. This is awesome. And as we're going along, Ignatius and Loyola, for the most part, were pointing things out, like the biggest eagle's nest I've ever seen. We came around a bend, and we surprised a flock of swans. There had to be 50 of them. I saw sea lions. I saw seals. And then all of a sudden, Daniel cut the motor and stopped it, just turned it off. And he pointed, and we looked, and there was a bear in the shallows of the river, very close to the riverbank. And she was sitting there, and every time a salmon got close, she smacked it onto the riverside. And her cubs, who were chewing in the bushes, would run out and just devour that fish. And then just wait for another one. And we were watching that, and Daniel turned to me, he goes, people will live their whole lives without seeing this, and you're getting to see it. And then when it was finished, when the bear finally got up and left and took her 2 cubs, Ignatius said to me, where you live, do you have salmon berries? I went, well, no. He goes, well, that's what they were eating, salmon berries. Well, okay. He goes, I'll tell you the story about how salmon berries came to be. A mother bear sat in the middle of the river. No salmon could get past. And when they got close enough, she would smack them up onto the riverbank so that her cubs could eat them. And this went on all morning. And finally, Father salmon came up and said, "Great Bear, I know you are strong, and I know you care for your children. But if you do not let us pass, we will not be able to spawn and give birth to the new generation." And Mother Bear said, "That does not bother me." So he continued. He goes, "You need to understand that if we don't go north and spawn, there will be no little ones coming down the river and into the sea. And next year, there will be no salmon coming up that river, and your children will suffer." And the bear just sat. And then finally Salmon said, "Mother Bear, if I could give you a food that your children would eat, would you allow some of our salmon to go by so that we may bring forth the next generation?" And Mother Bear said, "Can you do it now?" And Father Salmon backed up, popped out his red eyes, threw him into the water, and used his tail to swat him onto the riverbed. And as soon as they hit the riverbed, bushes broke up. And they started going this way and that way, and they covered the entire riverbed. And then when the sun shined down on them, these bright red berries appeared. And bear cubs love them. And that's how they got the name salmon berries. You got it. Well, we finally got to Kotlik. And it's a village that was half the size of Amonic. So we take Amonic, which was at about 50 people, 50 families. Kotlik was about 20 families. And in Amonic, I had a house all my own. Kotlik wasn't prepared for me. They didn't know I was coming so soon. But I did have a living quarter. They had a mission church, which is about the size of this whole room. And my living quarters were in the back of it. I didn't have a door. I had a curtain. And then I had a little electric stove here. And then over here, there was kind of a place where I could put my stuff. And then over here, there was a table and a chair. And actually, my living space was just about the same as what you're seeing here. I had no windows and no running water. You don't even want to know how I went to the bathroom and took showers. That's another story. Well, I got to meet Daniel's family, and they were just wonderful. And they realized that I didn't have any food. So they fed me for the next 3 days until we could stock up. Well, that first day, at the end of the day, I went to bed. Oh, I had a folded army cot, as it turns out, and it had 3 blankets and a pillow. And they were very proud that I had 3 blankets. Okay. I wake up the next morning to Daniel. He comes into the church and he goes, "Mike, are you awake?" Well, yeah, now. So I came out and he said, "Come walk with me." And he was very serious. So we left the church, and as we came out of the church, there were 2 other men clearly waiting for us. And as we were walking along, Daniel said, "Mike, did you hear that plane this morning that landed?" And I said, "Well, I heard a plane, but since I don't have any windows, I didn't know it landed." And he goes, "Well, it did." And we continued to walk. He goes, "Now, you know, of course, that Kotlik is a dry village." And I said, "Oh, yeah, I read that in the information." She said, "There's no alcohol here at all." I said, "Well, great, I don't drink either." He said, "Well, that plane, its cargo is alcohol." I went, "Well, how do you know that?" He looks at the other 2 guys, and then he says, "Inuit women know everything." So, okay. And as we got closer, I looked, and every woman in the village was walking toward that plane, and every one of them had something sharp. A knife, a fish spear, or an ulu, which is kind of this blade that's curved like this and it has a handle in the middle, and it's called the women's knife. And if you're really good with it, with one motion, you can cut, slice, and fillet a king salmon with one move. It's that sharp. And as they got closer to the plane, they sort of formed a circle around it. So the guys kind of stopped, and I looked around, and all the men in the village were there, but they were way behind the circle, and they were in little pockets, 3 or 4 guys. Again, and Daniel turns to his 2 friends, and he goes, "Now, Mike's going to tell this guy they've got to leave." And I'm like, thinking, this guy's got way more confidence than I've earned at this point. And I looked and I said, "Why me?" And his answer was so good. There was no reason to ever write a book about it. Just use his answer. I asked him, "Why me?" And he looked at me and goes, "You're the only white guy in the village." So I walked past the women, and as I was going towards the plane, one of the guys got out of the plane. And my first impression was he looked like G.I. Joe, only fat and old. And he had the camo stuff on, aviator glasses, that whole bit. And he had a rifle, and he was holding it like this. So I put my hands out, just so he knew that I didn't have anything sharp or anything at all. And I didn't even bother with introductions. I just said to him, "The women aren't going to buy what you're selling, so you might as well leave." And he just looks at me and goes, "Well, what about the men?" And I kind of looked around and I said, "Well, to tell you the truth, I don't think the men have a say in this." And he goes, and he spits. He goes, "Well, what do you think I'm going to do?" I said, "Well, you're not going to sell the alcohol here." He goes, "Oh, yeah?" And then he looked around and he goes, "And what's with all the knives? Are they going to kill us?" I went, "Oh, no. They're not going to kill you. They're going to slice your tires. And you'll be here for a long, long time." So he held his own for about 30 seconds, spit one last time, got back in the plane, turned it around, and took off. Now, you would think, that being my first whole day in the village, that they would cheer for me or something, but they just kind of turned and walked away. And Daniel's mother, who was the oldest woman in the village, as she walked by me, she put her hand on my shoulder and said, "Jarkanat," which I'm sure I mispronounced. But about 2 weeks later or so, I found out that meant thank you. Well, there it was, the perfect picture. 2 villages, 2 different worlds. And that was the crisis of Alaska. There's a part 2 to the gerbil story.
No pressure. Let me think of it real quick here. Now, what I've got for you is a Korean folk tale. Now, we always begin stories from America or Europe with "once upon a long, long time in a long and a far and distant land or place." But in Korea, they always begin stories with "Yanal, Yanal, Aduyanare." Once there was Tiger. Tiger was hungry. He came out of the forest, and who did he happen to see? But Baby Rabbit. "Oh, Baby Rabbit, I'm so hungry. I'm going to have you for lunch." "Oh, Mr. Tiger, do you like mochi?" Mochi? "Yeah, rice cakes. I happen to have some right here." And Baby Rabbit reached down and grabbed hold of 5 white stones that just happened to be laying on the ground. "See? Now, Tiger, can you build a fire?" Yeah, I can build a fire." "Good, because it tastes so good toasted." And so Tiger built a fire. And Baby Rabbit took those 5 white stones, place them right in the middle of the fire. You know what would be really good? A little bit of soy sauce. Just a little bit of soy sauce will make this mochi taste really good. I happen to have some at home. I'm going to go and get it. There are 4 mochi in the fire. Don't you eat one? I won't eat any. Good. So Baby Rabbit took off. Never came back. And meanwhile, Tiger's pacing back and forth for the fire, going, oh, I'm so hungry. I'm so hungry. I'll just count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Baby Rabbit says it's 4. They're really 5. I could eat one. Baby Rabbit wouldn't know. Should I eat one? Well? Yes, okay, I'll eat one. So Tiger reached in that fire, picked up one of those red-hot white stones, and swallowed it down. Oh, it burned all the way down. Oh! It burned all the way around. Oh! And it burned all the way out. It was a long time before Tiger could eat anything else. And then he concluded that he didn't like mochi after all. Thank you very much. That's our show. Come on up. Mike Devenney, Chuck McConnell, and I'm Alton Takiyama-Chung. Thank you so very much for being here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for coming. If you enjoyed tonight's performance, again, we have another show next month. If you really like it, tell your friends, bring your friends over. And if you didn't like it, we prefer that you kind of keep that to yourself. And again, patronize Chris over there at the bar. Thank you so much for coming. We appreciate you. Good night.